Okay, welcome to this month's Azure Group meeting. There's the information about our group on the screen. I assume you can see my screen, correct? You see my screen, actually? Yes. Okay, great. Because the border around the screen disappeared, so I just didn't know why. Okay. So anyway, that's our that's our website address, and that's our YouTube channel. This meeting recording will be posted on the YouTube channel within a day or two. Let's move forward. You're here to learn about Microsoft Azure, okay? This is our mission. We're all about everything related to Azure, both from a development and from an infrastructure point of view. And we provide a forum for open discussion and informal networking among the membership. Unfortunately, we're not meeting in person at this point in time. We used to meet every third Thursday of the month up at Microsoft up in Nashville. And we will again as soon as things settle down a little bit. But this was our normal meeting schedule. We would have food and networking, one-on-one networking, and before the meeting, and then a main presentation. Currently, we're meeting online only. We're kind of proud of the fact that we have over 1,800 registered members here in Nashville, which still blows my mind because, Nashville's not one of the largest cities in the country, but we do have a tremendous, a great Azure community. Nonetheless, we could still use more members. So, tell everybody about us. Anybody who's interested in Azure, we'd love to have them join us. And if you have a particular topic that you would like us to cover, let us know. I usually don't ask the whole group at large. I usually just ask the folks who show up at a meeting because, those are the ones that we want to take good care of. So let us know if you've got a specific topic that you want to present, or a topic that you're interested in having us find someone else to present. This is our board of directors. I'm the founder and the president of the group. I started this group 8 years ago with 4 people. And like I say, now we're up to 1,800. By day, I'm a solutions architect for CTG here in Nashville. Co-founder Raja Dalman. He's co-founder and vice president. He's also an enterprise architect at Deloitte by day. Tim Warner's a name that you may have heard, you probably heard of, especially if you use Pluralsight at all. Tim does a lot of the Azure courses that are up on Pluralsight, as well as other courses as well. He's a Microsoft Azure MVP, and he's written books, and he authors a lot of the Pluralsight courses. Okela Allred is our board member and director of academic outreach. And Matt Puckett is our permanent meeting space sponsor when we meet at Microsoft. He's been that sponsor for 7, now going on 8 years. By day, Matt is a Microsoft Principal National Cloud Solution Architect. And Jack Hagler from Vaco is our permanent refreshment sponsor. Naturally, we're not doing refreshments these days while we're meeting just virtually. So Vaco is providing us with this Zoom subscription that we use, for which we are grateful. And while we're on the subject of sponsors, this is another listing of our sponsors. Is Microsoft again for the meeting space when we meet on site. Excuse me. Microsoft also pays our dues for Meetup. Up until this past year, I was paying for the Meetup dues out of my own pocket, but now Microsoft is covering those dues as part of their sponsorship. Again, Vaco for the refreshments when we meet in person and the Zoom subscription. My company, Computer Task Group, CTG, for my time running the group, and the Greater Nashville Technology Council, which also supports the technology groups here in Nashville, including my group. If your company is interested in sponsoring a future meeting, get in touch with Roger Dolman at that address and let us know what you're interested in doing. We could always use swag, things to raffle off to our membership. And with that, I want to turn it over to tonight's presenter. Zvi is a senior software architect at Computer Enterprises. and he's going to talk about Azure Arc and managing hybrid servers. And Z, want to take over? Siva, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
1 second.
Okay.
Okay, so you can see my PowerPoint slide, right?
Yeah, I can. Okay. Yeah. I see. We see it.
1 second.
Good.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing
Cool.
video too. Save some bandwidth.
Yes. Okay. So hello everybody, and thanks for giving the opportunity to speak in your Nashville Microsoft Azure users group. I have talked in Music City a couple of years before, Music City Tech, and I'm living in Orlando, so I just traveled up there for talking. Other than that, yeah, Nashville is like nice city. That's the only connection I have so far with the Nashville. So thanks for having these kind of online meetings so that we can present it from anywhere. So right now I'm sitting in Orlando and you guys are in Nashville, and we are talking with each other and sharing the knowledge and sharing the ideas, right? So that's a good thing to have. So today we are going to see the Azure Arc managing the hybrid servers. So I have prepared this talk a couple of years before. I need to swap the display. Give me a second. Yeah. So I have prepared this talk a year before, and me and Bill talked about presenting this topic for a long time. But finally, today, we are going to present it. And also, there are a lot of a great announcement on Azure Arc, right? So today we are going to see uh, what are the Azure Arc and what are the concepts behind it, and what are the new announcement as well, and why they are doing that announcement and what is the directions behind that, right? So we are going to touch base most of the concepts a little bit, and also going to show a couple of demos. So let's dive in. So the agenda of the session, as I said, it's going to be like this. First, we are going to see what problem Azure Arc was designed to solve. What is hybrid cloud? What is multi-cloud? And why Azure is showing interest on managing the other infrastructure, right? The servers from other infrastructure or Kubernetes cluster from other infrastructure. So we are going to see what's the strategy behind that, why Azure is showing interest on that. And secondly, we are going to see the overview of Azure Arc, what is trying to do, and what are the concepts behind it. And there are multiple phases in that Azure Arc. So we are going to see Azure Arc for managing the servers, and Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes, how we are going to manage the workloads that's running in the Kubernetes, and Azure Arc enabled data services, Azure Arc for app services. This is a new announcement they have made a couple of weeks before, and a short demo pretty much on Azure Arc for servers and Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes. Right. So this is how we are going to talk, and we are going to go through this Azure Arc concept. So the introduction about me, I think Will already said. I'm Siva, working as a senior architect in CEI, Computer Enterprises Inc. And I'm one of the Dapper member. You might already know Dapper is one of the open source that's provided by Microsoft. That's for managing the cloud. Basically, you can access the cloud from anywhere, right? Basically, it's the abstraction layer. You can access any APIs from your Kubernetes cluster or standalone app. So I'm a regular contributor for that Dapper open source, and also I'm a member for that Dapper organization. And also I'm AWS community builder, focusing on containers and Kubernetes, and Azure ambassador on security. In the day-to-day job, my most focus is on cloud, mobile, and IoT solution, and I'm working on a lot of IoT projects especially like managing the devices at the scale, and also like how we are going to connect the data and all. So I'm doing like a lot of cool IoT projects in current day job. And as I said, like I'm from Orlando, Florida, and I'm staying right near to the Disney Magic Kingdom, so I can see like a Magic Kingdom fireworks here. Once like everything is back to normal, I'm planning to go like every day, as usually I do like pre-pandemic, right? So that's like the introduction about me. So if you have any questions while we are going through, just like raise your hand or like chat. Uh, I will like try to answer at that moment itself. Right? Okay. So the first thing we are going to see like what is hybrid and what is multi-cloud and what is that concepts behind these buzzwords, right? Basically like the scenario and the unified operations we are going to talk. So the first thing, the hybrid cloud. So hybrid cloud, this is like the normal operating model whenever like we are trying to mix both the traditional infrastructure and as well as the cloud, right? So this is like both cloud computing that combines like a private or public cloud with like on-premise infrastructure. So why the hybrid cloud is like hybrid cloud allows the data and applications to consistently move between the cloud and your on-premise environments, especially like when we are deploying these kind of application workloads in like financial institution, right? At the time, for like a data sovereignty and also like the governance for data security thing, the data might be in on-premise data center, but for like the scaling purpose, the compute logic that might be deployed in like the cloud for like quick scalable infrastructures, right? So in this kind of like environment, the hybrid cloud model that's going to like enable that uh, the communication between those infrastructure and also like it keeps up regulatory and the data sovereignty requirements for that, right? So this is how that hybrid cloud model usually works. But nowadays, like we are mostly focusing on like a IoT and the Kubernetes thing. So we want this compute capability and also like that data capability in the device itself, where it's running closely to that the IoT devices model. So instead of sending all the data to the cloud and sending back to the devices, the device itself is trying to be part of the entire infrastructure we are trying to build. So that's making this hybrid cloud model more visible to that the IT people, because previously we have the traditional infrastructure, but some company they have moved into cloud completely, and a few companies because of that the security and the data sovereignty they keep up both cloud and as well as like the traditional infrastructure on premise. But the IoT, it's like boosting up this the traditional infrastructure. That means the on-premise environment, on-premise devices, right? So that's like again the IoT edge is like facilitating that one, and it's bringing the on-premise devices back to that the normal mode, right? So basically, like it's not completely operate in the cloud. It's like operate in the cloud as well as mostly operate in that the on-premise device itself, right? So that's where like the hybrid cloud is coming. And there is another term that is called multi-cloud. So hybrid cloud is different from multi-cloud. Hybrid cloud is mostly like your private cloud and also like your on-premise environment. But multi-cloud is like having computing services from like a more than one cloud providers. So there are like a lot of cloud providers like AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, and some other cloud providers like IBM or like Alibaba. So there are like different cloud providers there, right? So the multi-cloud strategy, it's giving like more flexibility in the sense like we are using this multi-cloud as a like a as a strategy to have that more flexibility, control, and as well as like the scalability thing. So the reason is, for example, like I'm having a I want to use a service, but in that service I'm running in like AWS, but in AWS I'm finding like another alternative service that's available in like other cloud, right? So at the time, then I'm trying to combine like two different cloud providers as like a strategy so that I can run my workload in like multiple cloud providers. For example, like if I want to use more machine learning capabilities, and I see like the Google Cloud platform is like more sophisticated in the machine learning, and I'm having like a lot of options over there, but still I want to use like my app services, everything in like Azure, then you can bring like other cloud providers as well and build the strategy around that so that it can operate on the multi-clouds, right? So that's a multi-cloud strategy. So usually like it's not like the separate strategies. Sometime like we are using both hybrid and the multi-cloud. But multi-cloud is like the new strategy which we are seeing. It's not like necessary to use like all your services in different clouds. It's based on your business use case, right? So if your business use case demands and you want to try like a different cloud providers for different services, at the time you can use. So that's giving like more flexibility. Otherwise, if we just want to use the multi-cloud just for like our purpose, then it's not going to give any value on that, right? So together in hybrid or multi-cloud platform, it's give like the organization, like as I said, like the many advantages, more flexibility, control, and also like the scalability, the different deployment option. So there are like a lot of advantages over that. As I said, like as your business demands, then you can go for this hybrid and multi-cloud strategy to have these benefits there, right? So now, let's say this is a diagram you usually see it in like Azure Arc, right? So this is what like we have discussed. So we have this multi-cloud and also like the on-premise servers, including like the data base and also like your bare metal servers here, right? In the right-hand side, this is where like the IoT devices and everything is going to come. So in IoT use cases, um, not only like the connected devices, sometimes there is like offline devices as well, right? For example, Disney Cruise Line, if you are doing like any IoT project in the Disney Cruise Line, everything is going to be like an offline scenario. So most of your workloads, everything is going to be run on like the offline cases, right? So the on-premise and the edge, so these are like the different environments we are going to see, and also like the multi-cloud that's coming from the different cloud providers. So now the challenge is how we are going to see as like the unified control plane. So since we are going to do like multi-cloud on-premise edge, the maintaining that the infrastructure and also like making sure we are updating the policies and all. So that's like bit more challenge because we don't know like where that the infrastructure resides. So for like every cloud, we need to go for like every cloud dashboards, those kind of thing. So that's where like the Azure Arc is bringing this capability. So Azure is trying to bring like a hybrid and multi-cloud strategy to the Azure. So Azure starts with like, okay, let's give that control plane so that like they are controlling the infrastructure that's from their own servers, right? So the Azure Arc is trying to give that portal UI so that we can control, basically like we can connect and control the different servers that is on multi-cloud or on-premise and on the edge servers. Luckily, we have this the Kubernetes cluster, so that is also like the similar strategy they are trying to do. So as long as like you are running any workloads on the Kubernetes, you can run on like any infrastructure, right? So the Azure is trying to integrate with the Kubernetes and bring this capability so that they are managing all this infrastructure in using the Azure Arc, and also they are trying to run the Azure services in like Kubernetes in the different infrastructure and managing everything through like the Azure portal itself. So that kind of like the unified control plane that's going to give like a more flexibility and also like more control features to the IT admins, right? And also like using the Kubernetes, we are like modernizing the on-premise infrastructure. So even though like the here we are having like the multiple hardwares, the bare metal servers, but we are bringing like the Azure Kubernetes, not the Azure Kubernetes. We are bringing like the Kubernetes cluster and managing that Kubernetes as well as through the Azure Arc. So by that way, like we are modernizing that on-premise infrastructure as well, so that it can take care of like a scaling up and down, and also like extending its computing and the other capabilities to the server itself, right? To the server or to the edge itself. So that's what like the Azure Arc is designed for, and Azure Arc is part of that Azure hybrid and multi-cloud strategy they are planning as like a yeah, big future, right? Yeah, so these are the points I have discussed already. Like Azure Arc is for like managing and governing that plane and bring Azure services anywhere and modernize the platform. So now let's take a look at this diagram a little bit so that we know like how the Azure Arc is working, right? So ideally, so we have these multi-cloud workloads that's coming from AWS, Google Cloud, and any other infrastructure. And also there is like a on-premise data center. This is where like our VMs, Windows server, Linux server, bare metal servers, everything is coming, right? And also as like the cloud, we have this the Microsoft Azure subscription. This is where like our cloud-based workloads are like deployed, and we are having like virtual machines, AKS, basically like everything in the cloud itself, right? So here we want to manage this server as well in the Azure, and also like the other cloud servers that we are put it in the multi-cloud here. So the Azure Arc is combining this on-premise data center and also like the other multi-cloud workloads, and enabling that as part of the Azure Arc enabled infrastructure and services. So when you log in into the portal, you might be seeing like, okay, this is the virtual machine that's in Azure Cloud. And when I go to the Azure Arc, you can see like, okay, this is the servers that's coming from that on-premise or like the different cloud, so that you can have this connectivity that's going. So yeah, so this is how like it's operating. But if we go for like a little bit deeper to understand like how that works, let's say like the server part. So if you want to connect like any Linux or Windows server to the Azure portal here, so what we need to do is we need to install a Azure Arc server agent in the server what we want to manage, so that like this Azure Arc server agent that's able to connect to the Azure Arc in the Azure portal, so that you can see like, okay, I can manage this Linux server, Windows server, and also I can monitor like what are the different CPU or like any other the infrastructure metrics. And also like we can set the policy using the Azure policy here, so that we know like, okay, I'm expecting this machine has to be secure with SSH key and password, and this has to be like a strong password, and there are like other policy rules, so that we can set up the policy rules. And this policy rule will be like pulled up by this Azure Arc server agent, and it checks its mission here, and it just say like, okay, whether that submission is like compliance or not. So based on that, the IT admin, they know like, okay, not only the Azure mission, they are applying their policy and the security rules. They are doing it for like the on-premise server and also like the other cloud server as well, right? So let's take a look at that first in a demo, and then we can explain like how the Kubernetes cluster, how the data services and everything. Okay, so for that one, so I'm in my Azure portal, and this is like the Azure Arc service. And here you can see like I have a couple of infrastructure um, items here, right? So first, we are going to see like how we can connect these servers to the portal, and then we can see like one by one. So here I have already added like two servers. One is from my virtual box here. So in this virtual box, I have installed that the Azure Arc agent. So here you can see like this agent is connected, and you are seeing I'm able to see that that server in that servers list, right? And also I have connected one instance from Google Cloud. So this instance is running from like the Google Cloud. I have installed the agent, and I'm able to see that server here, right? So to add that server, it's pretty simple. You need to go to that add server. There are two options here. One is like add a single server and add multiple servers, right? So what's the difference is when you add a single server, it's going to be like asking your credentials, but you need to do the device-based login. So you have to do like interactively log into the Azure portal so that it can configure that script, right? Add multiple servers. Here you are like generating your service principal and client ID and secret, so that like it's configured as part of that the service principal credentials. So you can run it on any script without doing like any interactive login, right? So for right now, let's do that the single server login. So it's going to ask like, okay, it has to be like a HTTPS access to that particular Azure service that has to be enabled. And we need like the local admin permission for like a server and other thing, right? So in the resource details, I'm going to give like how I want that another machine that has to be like added. So it's a Linux machine. And if you want to add like the proxy server, you can add. So what I'm saying here is, okay, whenever you are adding a server from different cloud or in on-premise, just put it in this resource group and what type of server I'm going to add, right? And you can add the tags like which city it was in, and what type of cloud it has, all those things. And you can download and run the script. Basically, it's installing that Linux Azure Arc management, and connect to that Azure Arc management here, right? So let me copy this and go to the Google Cloud. I have one instance already connected. Now I'm going to connect the other instance. Okay. Okay, so this instance, I'm going to log in here. I'm going to run this only because it has already the management thing installed, because it's taking like some time there. So when you connect that, then that agent is trying to connect to that particular Azure Arc, and you are able to see that. Okay, it's saying like I have to be admin or like root permission. Okay, so here you can see, I think, I don't know how I can increase the font size. Large. Okay. So when I run the script, since I'm running through like the single device, you can see like it's asking the interactive code. So I need to log into the Azure portal. But if you are using like the service principal credential, you don't need to do this. And enter the code. Okay, close this. But now it says like successfully onboarded resource to that the Azure. So if we go back to that the Azure portal, close this Azure Arc. So within like yeah, so we got that the another machine connected here, and this is like another VM instance that's coming from the Google Cloud. Right? So this how like you can onboard like more servers from different cloud and also like the on-premise thing. So for demo purpose, I have used the single server, but for like if you are doing at the large scale, try to connect with like a service principal and password so that it can connect automatically. So I have this server right now. Now let's say like I'm going to one of the server here, and here I can install the extensions. So there are like a lot of extension available. So you can install like the monitor agent and also like the log analytics agent. So those are the things you can install as part of this the server. And also you can add the policies here, right? So this policy, this is going to run the complaints for like all the devices and show you like whether that server is in complaint or not, right? So this is like the initiative complaints. So this is having like a set of policy rules. It's going to continuously like evaluate in each and every server and see like what are the problems that's available in like each servers. So it's going to give that, and also you can start remediation. For example, here it says like perform software vulnerability assessment, right? As a remediation, so you can just like perform that thing. And also in case like you want to do any policies remediation from like the remote here, you can do that as well, right? So there are like a lot of policies. You can see like configure log storage retention, enable logging. There are like different policies in like the different categories. So it just like make sure everything is like compliant, and only like two policies is like not compliant here, right? Um, and also you can like enable, you can run like the initiative, or you can assign the policy. Let's assign the policy here if you want to do like more than the built-in policy. So here you can like define the scope, and also if you go to the policy definition, you can have like the list of around like 716 policy. So you can say like, okay, the private endpoint connection is done, and whether audit that Linux machine, or in case like a password, you can audit like whether the password or like a complexity setting enabled or not. So you can do like different thing, different policies, and most of the policies like common, and some of the policies for like specifically for Windows and specifically for Linux. So you can set up the policy based on your server group, and you can do that the mounting as well, right? Okay. And also, if I go to that instance, you can have like the update management, but right now like my log management that got like failed. But if you enable that log analytics agent, you should be able to do that the update management and the inventory, so that you can do everything from like your automation account, so that you have this control and complaints for that server using your automation account itself, right? And for logs, like basically like the insights, you can go to the insight here, and you can see like how your virtual machine or like how your server is performing by knowing like what is your CPU utilization, memory, and other like the infrastructure metrics here, to understand like what's going on in your servers using this connected agent here, right? Okay. Um, yes, so that's how this the server thing work. Let's go back to the slide quick. So this is where like we are seeing the server admin tools, Linux, and using the agent, we are able to see it everything in like in the portal, and also we can apply the policy here. Right? Okay. The next thing is like yeah. Do you have any questions? Okay, let me know. So the next topic is like Azure Arc Kubernetes. So right now, like we have seen how Azure Arc is able to manage or is able to like do that in the servers, right? The next thing is how we are going to manage, apply the same policy rules and all, and also like monitor the workloads, everything on like the Kubernetes cluster, and not only in like running on the Azure Kubernetes service, the Kubernetes cluster, it may run on like again any on-premise or like in any cloud based providers, right? So the same concept, like we need some agent to connect with the Kubernetes cluster so that we know like what's going on in that cluster, right? So for that, let's say like we have some customer managed Kubernetes cluster that's running on like on-premise, or that's running on like some IoT devices so that we are able to run like IoT edge workloads in the Kubernetes, or like it's coming from the different cloud providers. So for that, we need to install like the Azure Arc Kubernetes agents inside the cluster, and that agent is going to continuously uh, listen for that Azure or policies, or like looking for like any other configuration changes so that it can apply that configuration changes into the Kubernetes cluster. Basically like a provision your cluster, upgrade and doing like patch management, and like cluster lifecycle management. So those are the things like deploying the workloads, those kind of things. So this Azure Arc enable Kubernetes agent, that's like doing that for you so that you can deploy everything from like Azure portal itself, or like from the Azure itself, like how we are managing the Azure services. So instead of like doing it in your premise, on-premise, you are doing it in your Azure portal itself, and also managing that cluster, right? So for that one, let me quickly show that demo as well. So for that, here you have to go to the Kubernetes clusters in the Azure Arc and add your Kubernetes cluster with Azure Arc. It's going to give you a set of scripts as we have done already. So it's going to ask like what cluster details, and give that a script. And basically you need to run the script in your machine that's having the Kubernetes config, right? So for that, I have created a Kubernetes cluster in AWS. So in AWS, it's called Elastic Kubernetes Service, EKS, like how we are calling EKS in Azure. So here I have the Kubernetes cluster running, and that Kubernetes cluster has like a couple of nodes. Everything is like managed by the AWS itself, right? So what I have done here is I have connected the cluster, and also I have run that script. That script is basically running your install your agent into the cluster, right? So let's quickly see how the cluster looks like. So I have installed the Kubernetes config, and I am able to query that the Kubernetes cluster, basically that the EKS cluster. So if you do that, I can see like all the pods that got deployed. And if you see, it has like the AWS node and other AWS details. But also you can see like the Azure Arc namespace here, right? So this namespace that has like multiple services, including like the cluster connect agent and other agent like the identity operator, and the Azure AD proxy, metrics agent, resource sync agent. So there are like a different agents that's coming as part of that script. So whenever you are running the script, it's installing all these services as a Helm release. And once everything is like configured and running, then your cluster is connected to that the Azure Arc here. Then you can go inside that cluster. As we have already said, like you can assign the policy and you can install the extensions. So you can like do like the container insights, metrics, everything from like the Azure portal itself. So even though like you are doing here, you are doing it on AWS EKS cluster, right? So that's how this works. The first thing you will see, like let's say how we can enable the GitOps integration. So the GitOps, how it works is, um, so here this is how like the GitOps work. So if you already know, there is a operator called a flex, and also there is a Helm operator as well. They have the latest version, but the flex operator and Helm operator basically enabling this GitOps principle in the Kubernetes cluster. So what that is doing is the flex, we are saying like, hey, this is my source of configuration. This is my GitHub source or some other S3 bucket source. Um, and the flex operator in the Kubernetes cluster, what it's doing is it's continuously like polling that the source, like do you have any changes I need to apply in the cluster, right? So whenever like we are pushing the new changes to that the Git repo, then the flex operator, it's pick up the changes and it's apply the changes to the Kubernetes cluster itself. So this is also running in the Kubernetes, but we are managing all the application and the cluster management changes, everything through like a Git repo, so that like it's basically your state of the cluster is managed into the Git history, right? So this is like the normal operation we usually do whenever we are trying to do in like GitOps in any Kubernetes cluster. But how that's different from like Azure Arc connected Kubernetes cluster, right? So here we have like multiple Kubernetes cluster from like any infrastructure. And once you install like the Arc connected agent, then it's going to be like Arc connected Kubernetes cluster. And it has the GitOps configuration. So whenever you apply that configuration, the flex operator that's installed as part of this Arc agent, that's going to configure everything for your Git repo and everything here, right? So let's see like how that works pretty quick. For that, you need to go to the GitOps here and add the configuration. And I have added the configuration here, like um, the namespace is GitOps, and this is where my like my cluster configuration changes available, right? So that GitHub is nothing but having like a simple manifest, the Kubernetes YAML manifest. So that has like what are the namespaces I have to apply for the cluster. But you can extend this one for like more powerful managing your entire cluster itself, right? Like install Redis, install like Loki stack, install Grafana for like monitoring stack. So you can basically like manage all your cluster application through the Flex. Um, but the Azure Arc is enabling that one for easy for you so that you can manage everything through like the Azure portal. Okay, so here I have like simple YAML file that's creating the namespace dev. So if I go to that the Kubernetes cluster here, and if I see that namespaces, I have that the dev namespace, right? And also I have the flex operator that's running on this GitOps namespace, since I have configured the GitOps using that Azure Arc. So you can see like that operator is running. Right? Now, let me push the changes. I am going to add like another namespace like stage, and I'm committing this. And I'm pushing the changes here. it's in the different branch. Check out. Okay, so I push the changes here, right? So if I go to the repo and see the namespaces folder, I can see like the two YAML file. One is creating the dev namespace, and another one is creating like the stage namespace. So if I come here and search for like the namespaces, the flex operator is automatically pull the changes, and it should created that new namespace stage here 22 seconds before, right? So this how like you can manage your Kubernetes cluster connected with a GitOps, but like based on Arc enabled Kubernetes. The one thing is like it's not like Arc specific feature. You can do it in like any Kubernetes cluster, right? Why we are saying like Arc enabled thing is like Azure Arc, even though it's like managing other Kubernetes cluster, it's enabling these GitOps and everything configured using that the agent itself, and it's like facilitating that the GitOps functionality in on-premise Kubernetes and other things, right? So that's what I meant to say. Like this is not Azure Arc based feature, but still Azure Arc is providing that capability to us. Okay, so that's how like the GitOps work, but you can check like the other policies and also like the insights to see like the container workloads and the container logs, those kind of things, right? Okay, so that's about like the Azure Arc Kubernetes cluster and the demo behind that. I'm going to go to the next topic. So here, like you can see that what nodes, what containers and all, this is what I told. The next thing is we have this Azure data services, right? I don't have the demo built up, but the concept behind is like you can, there is another agent that is like Azure Arc data agent. So you can install that in like in your, again, like on-premise server and also like that, the traditional, the Kubernetes cluster using the Azure Arc data controller, and also like the Azure Arc is able to bring everything back to the data controller, and using the Azure Arc data controller, you are able to manage that the SQL Server and also like the Postgres SQL database, right? The one of that the feature we see like for example like the financial organization and all, the data has to be like very secure and it has to be inside that on-premise network itself, right? But using this Azure Arc, you can like basically hyperscale within your data center, and the Azure Arc is able to like continuously monitor and apply the policy and all from your Azure portal itself, right? So basically, you can apply the policy. The security center is able to like help on monitoring and collecting the logs on your server logs to that Azure portal, right? Basically, like instead of going inside every server and see the logs, we are collecting all the logs into the unified place, and we are managing everything from the Azure portal here. Okay, so the next thing, last week Azure announced like a couple of services, Azure App Services Anywhere with Azure Arc, and also like Azure Machine Learning Anywhere with Azure Arc. So today we will see like how Azure App Service Anywhere with Azure Arc is working, and I will try to show like a short demo on that. Basically, like how we deployed that Kubernetes cluster using Azure Arc, right? So these Azure App Services and also like the Azure Machine Learning Anywhere with Azure Arc, basically is a concept that's running on like, okay, using Azure Arc portal, you can run Azure App Services such as Azure Web Apps, Function App, Logic Apps, and also like the Azure Machine Learning service, like any machine learning training experiments and all. So you can run this on your infrastructure, but you need to run on top of the Kubernetes cluster, right? So the Kubernetes cluster is able to run all these things, but you can manage still everything through like the Azure portal. So that's the concept behind that. So this is how it's working. Like you are going to have any hosting platform, and Azure Arc is like facilitating this Kubernetes or like the fully managed infrastructure. And on top of the Kubernetes, we are going to use like a web app, function app, logic app, and also like the API management part, right? And there are like other underlying integration, like the messaging, the event hub stuff, and also the Dapper. This is where I talked about like the distributed application runtime, how we can use that the Dapper as part of this the integration, right? So the application services with Azure Arc is able to like I can deploy the web app, function app, logic app at like any infrastructure over there. Um, okay, so I will quickly show that demo to you. So let's say like we have this the Kubernetes cluster, right? So to install that app service in the cluster here, if you see, you can see that the custom locations. So the custom locations is basically like we are saying, hey, uh, usually in like a web app, function app and all, we are saying like, okay, this is my location and this is my like the availability zone. So this is where that basically that app service plan has to be created, right? But in the custom location, we are saying like, okay, this is not in the Azure region. It's going to be in like anywhere my custom cloud or like my on-premise it's going to be. So we are going to add that custom location here. And we are going to say, okay, this is my resource group. This is my cloud name, the custom location name. And we are going to select the cluster, like the Azure Arc enabled cluster, say like, okay, combine everything, right? Basically like link everything. So in this cluster, I'm going to have some custom location, and that custom location with the namespace, some namespace, and I'm going to create that location there. So basically like once you create the location, whenever you are creating a app service, you can select this custom location on top of like the other region selection. And if you are selecting this location when you are creating the web app is going to be deployed into your Arc enabled Kubernetes cluster, and it's going to be managed there, right? So let me quickly show that demo to you. So I have created like the Azure app service here, and the Arc enabled service is the Microsoft Web, basically like the Azure Web App, right? So when I do this one, I can go to the app services. I can create a app. So we are going to create a web application. So I'm going to choose that, and some website name, the code, I'm going to use like the node, the basic one, and US East, right? Okay, so this is where in the region, instead of like we usually, whenever we are creating, we usually create the regions here, right? But there are like the custom locations also enabled. So I'm going to say like, okay, create the web app, but it's not in the Azure region, created it in the custom location. So if I create that in the custom location region, if it's creating here, one second. Okay, so create here, and if you come and see, um, you might be seeing like a couple of services installing in the cluster. Basically, like that services are your Azure App Service, and whenever you are deploying the code in the Azure App Service, that's going to deploy in the Kubernetes cluster, and you can see that, right? So that's how it's working. Give me a few minutes. It's going to take some time. Because the agent has to like detect the new deployment and bring it. Okay, so now you can see the Azure Arc demo, the web app. It's started like 31 seconds before. Basically, this is like the web app we have created using the app service here. So you have to choose custom location, and that custom location is linked with the Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes cluster. So whenever you are deploying into that app service, it's running in any infrastructure or like any cloud, right? So basically this one is running on the AWS. So we are using as like Azure App Service, but that's running on AWS EKS cluster workload. But there is like the URL also they have provided. You can see like that's having some custom URL, not like the Azure websites.net. But I have like some issues on binding that the load balancer here with that, the AWS, even though it's having, let me see quickly. Yeah, it's not working properly. But let me quickly show the service is running so that we know like we should be able to see that, right? Okay, so okay. So I'm saying like, okay, just forward that port number. I think it's 8080. Let me see. So we are just like getting inside the pod and see like we are able to see that the deployed code, right? Mm. Localhost. So now this is the default code whenever we are deploying that Azure web app, right? So that web app is deployed into that Kubernetes cluster, and we are seeing that from the AWS EKS cluster, right? So this how like it's work. And also they have like Azure Function app and also the logic apps and the Event Hub. So you can have those kind of different app services deployed into the cluster, and you can see them. Right? So that's how the app service run everywhere that's working. And the other thing is the Dapper. So I will talk a little bit about the Dapper. I'm not going into dive deeper, just like the introduction thing, like the how Dapper works and all. Dapper having like the similar like goal to achieve the hybrid cloud thing, right? So let me quickly go through that. So we have, so this Azure Arc is solving everything from like the infrastructure perspective, right? You can bring the infrastructure and also like the monitoring perspective. So you can bring like any infrastructure and bring it to that the cloud, right? But the Dapper one, it's like a little bit different. That's having this the application runtime. So it's trying to abstract as much as possible from the application perspective. So the same concept, like you can run it on like any cloud or edge infrastructure, and the Dapper runtime, the distributed application runtime, that has like multiple building blocks. So it's going to abstract these building blocks using the HTTP and gRPC APIs, and your application code that's able to contact this API as like abstraction, but internally you can change like any implementation, right? For example, like the state management, let's say I'm using Cosmos DB in my production, but I'm using Redis in my local, then you can still like using the HTTP API itself, but change the configuration in your Dapper component so that it just switches the implementation between Redis and Cosmos DB, right? because you are going to have everything through the abstraction, and here like it's everything on like the configuration base. So that's how like the Dapper works in like Kubernetes and also like any of that infrastructure. So you can use like state store, DynamoDB, Cosmos DB, Redis without changing any application code, just changing that the component configuration code only, right? So that's how like the Dapper is trying to abstract. Still, you can use that multi-cloud, no vendor locking from the implementation side. Um, but the Azure Arc is taking care of like the just like policies, monitoring, and also like managing all the workloads from the Azure portal. So all that is taken care of like by the Azure Arc, right? So that's how like it's going to work here. Like the Azure Arc is enabling that the hardware part, and the integration wise, the Dapper is going to like close that the vendor locking stuff, and it's going to enable that cloud any cloud or like any library that's able to interact with your application, right? So that's like the overall introduction about like the Azure Arc and as well as like the Dapper. Um, so I have contributed much on Dapper. I know like a couple of internal workings. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer or explain more on that perspective. Okay. Yeah. So this like I have explained a little bit how everything works. Um, any questions? I think we came to the end. Or anything you
Okay.
want to see in detail?
Okay, anybody have any more questions? Excellent presentation, by the way. I was really impressed with it to see the breadth of what Azure Arc can really manage.
Yeah, I think they are going to bring like more data services, and also like more on like the machine learning as well, right? So that's
Mhm.
going to like that's going to be like broader, like even it is Azure, it's going to be like any infrastructure, right? So there are like a lot of thing we can expect, I assume, based on the research
Right,
announcement. Yeah.
right. Does anyone else have any additional questions? I'm gonna, I'll stop the recording in case you want to ask a question privately. I'll stop it now.